Hey everyone, this is the SIG Auth meeting for June 26, 2019. Uh, let's get started. So, an announcement from myself, I had sent out an email to the mailing list asking for feedback on any topics that people would like covered in the next SIG Auth deep dive in San Diego. If anyone has any particular desires for what they would like covered, that would be super awesome. Otherwise, I'd also consider like coming up with like 4 topics and making like a poll and sending that out to sort of maybe limit the infinite set of possibilities. I don't know if people have feedback on that. I haven't gotten any feedback at all, so if anyone has any, I'm open to it.
Will do.
With that, Joshua, are you on the call?
Hello, yes.
Would you like to demo?
Yeah, sounds good to me. Cool, yeah. I'll share my screen. Cool, I'm assuming people can see my screen. Yeah, cool. Yeah, so I'm Josh, Christian from JetStack. And yeah, we've been working on something called Kubernetes Proxy. Very imaginative name. But yeah, basically a reverse proxy to authenticate with OIDC to Kubernetes. So yeah, you typically want to use this when OIDC authentication isn't available. So, things like GKE, where you don't get to control the OIDC, or like DigitalOcean, etc. And also you can use it for kind of consistent like authentication across multi-cloud. So consistent RBAC, consistent user identity, control of the kind of CA of the OIDC. So yeah, it's reverse proxy kind of at the core, based on the kind of HTTP util proxy, which is quite nice. Recently in 1.12, I believe it was, the kind of reverse proxy got support for HTTP upgrades. So things like exec and logs and things like that kind of just work out the box, which is quite nice. Yeah, we've tried to kind of use as much of the Kubernetes code base as possible. So one thing, keeps the code very slim, and yeah, I mean, it's kind of at some least functionally correct in terms of the kind of code we're using. Yeah, so it keeps bug to a minimum, etc. So yeah, that's essentially how it works. You have Kubernetes proxy, typically running in your cluster, exposed like a service account. So impersonate, it will kind of grab kubectl requests, authenticate them using OIDC. It will then kind of rip out the kind of user info, repackage that into a impersonation headers. So grabs the username, the groups, and kind of extra headers, repackages the HTTP request, and then auths using Kubernetes proxies like service account. So yeah, when it reaches the kind of real API, it will kind of authorized based on kind of can a Kubernetes proxy authenticate? Yes. And then it will go on and authorize a kind of request based on the kind of impersonation headers. So you have the effect of kind of the person making the real request, except we're kind of using OIDC proxy, or using OIDC instead. So yeah, I guess the first limitation is that obviously you can't use impersonation when you're kind of going through Kubernetes proxy, because you can't stack impersonation. Yeah, I guess that's a kind of limitation, but yeah, I have a little demo to show. So this is a public website, you can go here. And we've written created like a little portal. So along with Kubernetes proxy, we've deployed Gangway, which is like a web server to kind of help generate kubeconfigs for you, and Dex, which we're using kind of to kind of sign OIDC. And then using that, we can do like an OAuth flow to like some backend to kind of grab someone's identity. So if you think of this in the context of like an organization or something, you might have kind of like OAuth identity already set up, but in this case, we're going to use like, GitHub. So, for example, for GKE, for example, so I do a sign in, log in with GitHub. Dex is now going to do like an OAuth flow with GitHub, and then I authorize. Dex grabs my identity, so in this case, it will be my name, my email address, and some other things. Grant access. And then it's Gangway is now going to generate a queue config for me, which is nice and convenient. Yeah, inside the queue config, so I don't mind sharing because it's not got much permissions. It'll generate an ID token like this. So hopefully this will come out all right. Whoops. Yeah. So yeah, it looks like this. I've kind of configured Dex to give group, so you can try this yourself, and you can do like a kubectl around GKE. And yeah, like I said before, like we own the CA, so it's kind of signed by us. So obviously, in like an organization and stuff, this is probably advantageous. The other cool thing as well, so we have a single Dex running that is signing all the tokens, but you'll notice that the kind of audience is different for every cluster, so which is really important, right? So sending requests to one Kubernetes proxy, you can't that QSub proxy can't kind of use it against another cluster. Yeah, so hopefully that was a different. Yeah, nope. Yeah, so shows a different audience. So yeah, that's pretty much it for that. I guess to talk about kind of future work. So this is a kind of 0.1 release. We'd be quite keen for people to try it and kind of like put some real stress on it. It's obviously putting things in the critical path, so it's very important it gets right. But in terms of like future development for features, so the first thing would be auditing. So clearly anything that isn't sent to the API server, kind of quote unquote real API server, won't get audited. So it's kind of our responsibility to kind of audit those requests that fail. And I guess the second thing would be doing kind of like a pass-through with authentication. So Sonnet Bitnami was interested in when requests come through that aren't OIDC or kind of fail, then we kind of use Kubernetes proxy as like a first or best effort auth and pass through request that we can't make. But yeah, that's still kind of up in the air how we'd want that to work. Yeah, and I guess the final one would be kind of supporting other authentication methods. But yeah, I guess that's a quick whistle-stop tour. If anyone has any questions or comments.
Do you think the clients of this will primarily be kube control, or do you see this being used for browser access?
Yeah, I'm not sure either, I guess. Yeah. I envision kind of this being set up in some largish company with multi-clusters in multiple providers that kind of have multiple teams, where they kind of have one kind of repo with single RBAC setup that some operator can maintain, and then they can kind of deploy that RBAC consistently across multiple clusters in multiple providers, and using the kind of Kubernetes proxy, users, quote unquote, so like developers and such, can kind of use that kind of OAuth flow and then kind of get tokens for each cluster. Yeah, and their kind of RBAC is kind of set up straight away. Yeah.
Do you run one Kubernetes proxy per cluster and then have a shared DEX?
Yes, exactly that. So DEX, so there's a DEX, single DEX, which is kind of single CA signer, and you run a Kubernetes proxy per cluster. So like it's very important that each Kubernetes proxy is a different audience. Otherwise, yeah, you have a mess where different Kubernetes proxies can kind of impersonate you to the other proxies, and yeah.
Did you consider using the request header authenticator instead of a impersonation?
No. Perhaps that's something I should look into. Yeah.
That you wouldn't have the problem where you can't impersonate through the proxy. However, it's probably not exposed on all managed Kubernetes offerings or any managed Kubernetes offerings. So
Interesting.
for like EC2 cluster, you wouldn't have that problem.
Okay. Perhaps again, you could have this concept of best effort, and maybe the Kubernetes proxy can discover when it kind of inits whether that kind of feature is enabled in the cluster that it belongs to. Perhaps that might be an option, but yeah.
The hard part is to get a client certificate. So it would probably be a configuration option.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't think that it's not that request headers enabled or disabled. It's actually being able to authenticate to it. It's going to probably be a managed environment, because I think the request header is used for the aggregation layer anyway. It's just internal.
Yeah, from main API server to aggregated API servers. Yeah, but the CA is not always exposed.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
I've imagined people would use impersonation like this, and I have recommended it to people. But I will be interested to see how it holds up as people start using it more heavily. I think that it's probably, without doing any testing, significantly less performant than the request header authenticator. And it also shows up the double impersonation, or not being able to impersonate twice, is annoying. And I don't like how it shows up, particularly in audit logs. But nobody else has raised concerns yet, so seems like a reasonable path forward for now, and we can fix issues as they come up.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I mean, I can imagine the audit log's been quite spammy.
My big thing is that the principal shows up as the proxy, and then there's a impersonated principal in another field. I would have slightly preferred if the principal is always the thing that we do the authorization check on, and have the impersonating user be the second field. That way, the primary identity of the request is always in one field, and you don't have to do weird if statements on parsing logs that maybe came through impersonation proxy, or maybe didn't. But yeah, the impersonation is tracked through all the way to the API server audit. So you will have the same information there, or you will have equal information. We won't lose information, at least.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
Cool. Well, I'm definitely interested to hear if you run into any issues.
Cool, thanks, will do.
I was gonna mention on like the double impersonation thing, like nothing technically prevents you from seeing the impersonation headers come in and like doing the authorization check that the server would do, and then like impersonating the thing they're asking you to impersonate, it's just a little weird because then in the audit logs you'll miss the fact that the user, right? It's user A impersonating B, but you actually will see the proxy impersonating C.
Yeah, I know exactly.
Something you want.
We've thought about that quite a bit. So the first concern is the fact that we need to do the RBAC check rather than the API server, which can maybe cause some, well, it's another kind of very hot path that we're kind of touching. We had starting to touch the authorization layer then. And that's kind of, yeah, tricky. And yeah, secondly, the kind of auditing will look odd or not what you expect.
I wonder how double impersonation is something that we could conceivably report it or support if people asked for it. It's just not something we've done.
I'd be very interested in having that support.
Try if you want to load test it, the authorization for impersonation, add like 10,000 groups and see how slow your requests get.
Okay.
Cool. Does anyone have anything else before we move on to the discussion topic? Take that as a no.
Cool. No, I'll just say quickly, yeah, cheers everyone.
Thank you.
Hey, Jeff. I don't know the actual name of this GitHub.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
I don't want to try to pronounce that. I don't think I can. But I see you're on the call.
Can you hear me?
You're very quiet.
Any better?
Still very quiet.
Okay, let me try to go out and come back again. You can proceed with the next topic if any.
Related to, let's see, dynamic audit and registration. I can open up the issues while we wait. So I understand the reason for wanting to do this. I don't think it actually meets the general requirement though.
I tagged David in this one. He and I kind of went back and forth when this originally was done. I think this links to his comment. His point was a good one, which was like if you don't express any groups when you impersonate, then it's helpful to add authenticated. If you express groups, then there are cases where you would not want authenticated to be added as well. So a good one is if you are checking if a particular group has the ability to do something. So something you see people do a lot is can I checks, like as some user and as some group. And so if you wanted to check if a particular user with a particular group could do something, then running can I, get pods as user as group at that point, you are explicitly specifying the username and group that you want to be considered for that authorization check. And if we sort of helpfully add in other things, then what you think you're checking, you might not actually be checking. So it's kind of a question about, do we remove power from the API if we automatically supplement the list of groups? And the answer is yes. So I tagged David. I'm kind of inclined to leave it the way it is, but I'll see if David feels differently now. And
Yeah, I probably would leave it without strong motivation, since it's so easily worked around.
I would update the documentation. So that's a good point. The documentation should call out the behavior. So I agree with that aspect of this.
Yeah, I wish when you impersonated a user that it somehow impersonated the right group that the user would eventually have. But barring that, I like the fact that it just doesn't do anything special. You asked for this username and that's what you got. You asked for this group and that's what you got.
Yeah, I mean, given that Cube doesn't have a group source, I mean, wish-based authentication is on our roadmap, but we're probably not going to get to it soon. I was kidding.
You actually went really quiet, so I wasn't exactly sure what you said.
There is a group expansion bug though, which could conceivably do that if it was ever implemented.
Yeah.
Waiting more evidence.
Okay. Is that a priority? I can't remember the label. I never use this label.
I believe it's a priority.
All right.
Should we filter support issues, or should we deal with support issues here?
I'd like to make sure we at least have someone assigned to it. So
yeah.
What does support mean? Like when I hear support, I think of like Stack Overflow.
If something is clearly support, like please help me write a thing to do X, then yeah, we should just try to point to good resources and close it. The ones that are fuzzy is when you're not sure if it's a bug report, or it's like I did X and it didn't work, and it's unclear whether it's a bug or something wrong with the environment. So that's where I usually kind of ask a question and put the support label on there to make it clear that there's not like a bug that someone can go fix yet. I don't know how other people deal with that.
Yeah, that sounds fine until we have an idea of what is actually going on.
I mean, if something sits in like needs information for a month,
yeah,
then we can probably close it and say we don't have enough information to act on this. If you can reproduce a bug, please reopen this as a new issue. I think this is actually in that camp. 7, 9.
Did someone tighten validation on path prefix?
No, they had policies that forbid that. And it's unclear if they've configured PSP correctly, basically. So one of their policies forbids this, and one of them allows it, and we don't have the information about how they granted permissions yet.
Yeah, the part that was interesting to me is that they upgraded, and obviously it's not clear if they changed something during the upgrade.
Between 112 and 113, nothing relevant changed in PSPs, so I don't think it was related to the upgrade. I think it was probably something latent in their configuration that only was observed on a rollout, and that might have happened around the upgrade. I'll go ahead and close this. It's been like a month and a half since we have more information.
All right, I remember this is the one you had asked for. Okay. That's fine.
It could be that the original user was authenticated to create the pod, and then at update, something tried to update it.
This was a workload pod, so the user wouldn't have been involved.
This person has not gotten back after Sam's comment.
How long do we wait before we close things? We do have a bot that does close things. It's very slow.
That takes forever. I would, if it's still around to the next meeting, I would close it down.
Okay.
Yeah, let's wait for another meeting because we haven't hit the 30-day mark.
Okay. Do we want to talk about something from 2016?
This is we should triage it so it doesn't show up again.
I would say priority backlog.
Backlog? Awaiting more evidence. That's generous.
Right. awaiting more evidence.
OpenShift is evidence.
I mean, I would like this feature, but nobody's asking for it, so.
This is the longest bot command. Waiting more evidence. This one we're actually close to being able to take SIG off of, I think.
So we have something to do this release, right?
Yes. There were a few last add-ons that needed to complete the transition away from complete the transition to node scoped labels. So we should do that. And then I can't remember if it's next release, we can lock down on the node auth side which labels it's allowed to set. I have to look at the roadmap. So yeah, we
complete removal of in-tree -- node labels.
We're still using it, but the ones we're setting are ones that are scoped to the node, that are allowed to be set by the node.
Metadata proxy ready, kube proxy DS ready.
Or things under the kubelet prefix or the node prefix. So after this release, all of the add-ons and all of the in-project use of node labels will be limited to labels that we are fine with nodes setting and owning. Which means that probably 119 is when we can start enforcing. But whatever. Yeah, so so we fixed the kubelet and we fixed the add-ons this release, and then we can fix the API server in 2 releases, 3 releases.
All right. Sounds good.
So by getting close, I guess I mean not close at all, but at least there's a plan. This is like priority, important long-term. Soon means we're like finishing it this release. Oh, we're not. So important long-term.
Excellent. Well, I typed in soon because you said we're almost there.
Well, yeah.
Should we add a 16 milestone until we've done everything in our timeline or change the timeline?
Yes, because we want to make sure that the things for this milestone get attention. So yes. Can you do that, Mo? 1, 8, 3, 9, 4.
I've never typed this. What do I do? Is it one dot, like, do I,
Yes,
is there
there's
a
a-
D in front of it?
Yeah.
Why is my, did I just, it's like GitHub's like, no, you can't comment again. You just recently commented.
Unfocus and refocus.
Oh, good Lord.
It makes me sad that I know that.
Hey, I can set a milestone. Look at me. I'm special.
Okay. And who am I on this? Who's on this?
You and me.
You're there.
Okay. Someone reached out to me wanting to help with this. This would be a good. I'm trying to remember who that was. I'll track him down.
So that's everything. What happens if you refresh? Okay, just that one.
We were waiting on this one.
Okay.
There was one discussion topic that we skipped because we couldn't hear Sturek. But it looks like there were some new comments on the audit registration dynamic audit cap, which I'm not sure if anybody is currently working on.
I think we were going to try to set up a meeting the first or second week in July when Daniel gets back. Daniel had been looking at it mostly from the API machinery side. So when he's back in the office, we'll get together with Patrick and the people who are working on this and try to hammer out some of that in a way. So I think we will probably just defer to that meeting. We're going to set up a special meeting to walk through that.
Sounds good.
Does anyone have anything last minute before we close the meeting?
Just to point people at the certificates API retroactive cap that Mike did. We're going to try to get a plan together quickly for what we're going to do there for V1. So that's kind of a last call for on the existing one. And then we'll send a notification out when we get the proposal for V1 out.
Yeah, and I know I owe some responses like on this and then like the key ID one. I've not forgotten.
Okay.
Yeah, key ID one.
Actually, I did want to ask on the key ID one. I think I only really have one thing left in my head. Did we at some point change our contract on service account tokens, the secret-based ones, to say they're no longer opaque?
No, we haven't.
So like you can't put a key ID in it, right? Because it's opaque.
We generate whatever we want then.
I don't know if we have a contract. Do we have a documented contract that they are opaque? And people are just depending on implementation details?
Well, I mean, if you're doing it quote unquote correctly, right, you're using token review, so you're treating it as opaque and passing it.
Adding a key ID is an addition. It's not going to break anyone who's looking at existing claims.
But
No, I don't mean from a backwards compatibility. I meant more of a adding a key ID is explicitly stating that, hey, here's a field that you should look at and do things on.
The main purpose of that is when you're presenting tokens to someone else. And so if you're presenting secret-based service account tokens to someone else, that is not recommended because they're not audience scope.
Right. So I hadn't fully looked through the implementation of that, but didn't it change it for all service account tokens?
Probably, but if we only did it for dynamic ones, that wouldn't bother me, I guess.
Yeah, I was just thinking in my mind, right? Like, I don't want to encourage people to use the bit of opaque tokens we have in this.
Yeah, I don't know that key ID is going to be more or less enticing. Like if they're already sending those tokens to other people, that's bad. Key ID doesn't really make it. I don't know.
at least they're rotating the signing keys. Just kidding.
Yay. Your infinitely long tokens are slightly less infinitely long.
Yeah, I don't really see how adding key ID to those hurts us.
Yeah, it's more of just maybe we should just stop calling it opaque and say it's a JOT.
Yeah, that is a good point.
Yeah, I do random stuff like massages, tennis. So for those, I always have receipts. Yeah, but I think somewhere you're right. Somewhere in the notes they have mentioned that you can do the credit card receipt as well. So you can show your credit card. Just yeah. I think
I'm gonna say they were not trying to talk to us.
Yeah, I think that token review is not always feasible for validating those tokens, depending on the deployment or how new service account tokens are.
Yeah, the new ones are better too because they're time bound. So the old ones, token review was basically essential given their infinite life.
Yeah.
So the new ones that are time bound are much more reasonable to validate without token review.
Yeah, and there's a trade-off, but I would feel better about having some guarantee about how those tokens are shaped at this point. And I think it is useful to have some standardization. So yeah, we should consider maybe as part of the GA of token request, stating some guarantees.
Okay. So we want to write that down.
Yeah, let's see. It's kind of weird because we're talking about last time. Hold on. I'll make an action item section. That's not what I do. Oh, Google Docs, you're failing me.
That's the bound service account token KEP is another one that needs to be, or proposal is another one that needs to be turned into a KEP, but that should be easier because it's not writing from scratch. I think it's mostly reformatting.
We're here on the external key signer KEP. Mike, did you want to argue with me on why we should not use PKCS 11?
Yes, because like we shouldn't be loading shared. We shouldn't require an extension that is load a shared object and call some.
No, that can't be the canonical reason, right? Because like computers have been doing that forever. Like we can load C code if we have to.
I mean, it is different than every other integration point that we have in Kubernetes. It is not what we did for KMS, which is actually a better fit for PKCS11 than this is. The other reason for not doing it is because it is not, it's like a Venn diagram of what we need. It has a little bit of what we need, but not all of it.
So from the perspective that I saw is that we would just use it as a signer, but the way we use it to sign things is purely what the Kube API server decides to do.
So how do we pass a KID from an external provider in? Do we need a different extension point for that?
A key ID in or a HSM ID?
Key ID to put in the JOT header.
So let me think. Can it? Well, the actual key that the HSM is using, right, has a key or like an ID associated with it. So wouldn't it just be that?
Can it be arbitrary and you just name?
I think I've never configured a true hardware HSM, but like all the software ones that you configure, I assume the HSM would let you at least have some opaque level of control. Certainly, you don't get to play with the private key. I know you have to be able to at least tag it because you can ask, hey, I want you to load this specific key by like label or name or something. So you have to be able to refer to it in some way, and I assume that's how we would refer to it.
Then how is it rotated?
Rotate the
by label?
I mean, the HSM can do whatever it wants, right? Like it doesn't have to.
But so we couldn't refer to it by key ID then, because we need to change the key ID during a rotation.
Yeah. I mean,
the other thing was there was an issue that was old about supporting custom private claims in tokens. And while I don't know if that's something that we need or want to support, going with PKCS11 does bind our hands with what we can produce later on.
That part was actually, I didn't understand what you meant by that, right? Because if, like, what aspect of PKCS11, if we just use it as a signer, binds us to any particular contract?
Because it returns a signature versus, like, potentially modified payload.
Oh, you wanted to actually change the input.
Yeah, it depends on what we decide that we want to do. But if you wanted to have like a signer assert some claims about the managed offering, like this is AWS EKS cluster URN blah, then that might be something that is useful. I don't know, but it's not something we could do with an HSM interface. However, the other way around is entirely possible. So if we have a very use case specific interface that is flexible, you can implement that interface using PKCS11. But I don't see that the reverse is true.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of what I generally got from using a protobuf API over a custom protobuf API over a domain socket. Was basically we push a certain level of burden on everyone to implement that API in whatever way they want, but then they get incredible flexibility on doing it however they want.
Yeah.
But then the converse is true, right? Everyone gets to go implement their own thing. I have a feeling I might build me a generic KMS. Like I might build me a generic Unix domain protobuf proxy that just does PKCS11 and try.
That sounds useful. That sounds useful. I'm sure people would appreciate that and use it. Somebody out there.
Yeah, I haven't thought through all those details, but I figured my only concern was that if, like, I had heard some comments on KMS for like, yeah, we want to bridge it with PKCS 11, but that's like the only thing we want to bridge it with. Why isn't it just PKCS 11? And I'm not sure if it was that awful. Like, I do like the fact that the KMS API is just so small, and you can make it any smaller. So I don't want to belabor it too much. I just wanted to bring it up before we went on with like a new protobuf API.
Yeah, sure. Those were my main reasons. You should respond to my comment.
Yeah, in general, I am fine with moving forward with that kept. I had made comments about we need to implement the opaque verifier bits so we can actually do the rotation. But I think it's fine.
All right. It sounds good. It's always good to ask questions. So thank you.
I'm good unless anyone has anything else. I will re-request more feedback on topics for next deep dive, mostly because I don't want to be coming up with all the topics.
I'll take a look.
To a certain degree, what I might end up doing is looking at every one of our, what's the term, sub-projects? I don't know, the little chunks of SIG Auth that are divided up and just like going down the list. And here's a deep dive on this, and here's a deep dive on that.
Yeah, I'll take a look too and see if there's anything that sounds useful.
Cool.
Was there a deep dive today as well? I joined late.
This is for KubeCon North America.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
Yeah, they are recorded, so you don't have to come.
Okay.
See it.
All right. Sounds like that's it.
Thank you guys.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
So in GCP, we can see the stamped elements in the GCP UI. There is a corresponding UI in AWS, I'm supposed to be able to see those.